I do feel that in times where I've been involved in conversations where I felt like someone felt the need to convince me or to convert to anything, to Mormonism, to Christianity, to anything. It's that respect for each person's personal faith journey. Like if you're just discounting, they haven't done enough. They haven't figured it out because they haven't done the amount of work that I've done and I know more than them. That puts you on a defensive.
Lynley and I have a passion for relational evangelism. We've set out, even in our church planting adventures, to learn as much as we can about what it means to connect with people from different religious viewpoints. We read a book called I Once Was Lost. Do you even remember how we found that book, Lynley?
I don't remember, and I think we've talked about it before on the podcast, but I think you had some specific things to say about it here.
It's written by a couple of Campus Crusade guys who interviewed 2,000 postmodern college students who had come to faith in Christ. And what were the steps they had to take? What were the doors they had to pass through before they gave their life to Christ? And the first doorway was they remember the day they trusted a Christian. And we wanted to have another conversation about this because according to Lifeway research, the vast majority of pastors are having a hard time getting their churches to engage with the community. And we've learned a few things about this from being planters, from being in the field. And we wanted to have another set of neighbors on. This is Mike and Leanna Lusche. They lived right next to us in Denver. We had a chance to sit down with them in their house and record a conversation about what it was like to become friends with Christians and what they had to overcome in order to do so.
Yeah, and as we watch the world become increasingly non-religious and secular, like how do we learn how to build strong relationships with people who have a different viewpoint from us? And I'm afraid that we always sound like we have it figured out. You know, our street in Denver was really special, but we have struggled with this here in Nashville. And so I don't want to come across as if we have cracked the code on this and figured this out. Different places, they receive things differently. And so This went really well, our methodology there. It hasn't worked as well here. So, we just keep trying. Like, we don't give up on it. We just try it in different ways, and we hope you guys will too.
And I think you'll hear the affection and respect that we have for Mike and Leanna, that they have for us, even though we still, to this day, see some religious things differently. Mm-hmm. We've been able to maintain a close friendship, even despite those things.
Well, they're coming to visit us in November, which may be right around when this airs, so that'll be really fun.
Because the Denver Broncos are playing the Tennessee Titans in Nashville.
And also going to visit us at UT.
This is going to be
visit
fun.
Ava at UT. So yes, all kinds of fun.
So we love the Lusches. We think you're going to enjoy this conversation, how candid they are about their background with Christians and their understanding of Christianity. Also, we're going to stop about halfway through this and talk about some of the myths we had to overcome in order to reach unchurched people. Lynley, this might be the most fun setting we've ever been in for this podcast.
This was my idea, by the way.
It is.
Let's just clarify.
We are on the street that we lived on when we were in Denver, Colorado, planting a church, and we are in the home of Mike and Leanna Lusche at their dining room talking about a really fun subject. Mm-hmm. So, Mike and Leanna, thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, what we want to talk to you guys about today is we have this theory that people who don't go to church sometimes think that people who do go to church are a little weird. So when we moved to Denver and word began to get out on the street that these Southern Baptist missionary people were moving onto the street and they were going to kind of suck the fun off the street, mm-hmm. we knew that was going to be a barrier. So we tried our best to be kind of normal and not like freak you guys out with all of our weirdness. So we wanted to just have a conversation with you guys about that.
Sounds good.
So we have some questions we wanted to ask you. So first of all, we just want to just level set here. To our knowledge, you guys aren't big church-going people, right? Talk a little bit about, have you ever been a church-going person?
So for me personally,
yeah.
I was not. My mom was raised Southern Baptist. My dad was raised Lutheran. So they both had it in their upbringing. But when they were raising us, my mom wasn't really she didn't have a great experience there. And so she was not, I guess, pushing it at all. But my dad, once we got older, he was like, hey, no, this would be good for him. And so we tried a couple times, and it never kind of caught on. And then after that, really just a handful of times, Easter service with Leanna. I think we probably went once or twice with your parents. And so, yeah, I would agree. We are not big church-going people.
And Leanna, yeah.
Yeah, I a little bit differently. I grew up in the church. My mom was raised Presbyterian. My dad was kind of non-practicing Catholic. But growing up, they settled into like non-denominational type church settings. I went to I was born in Dallas, and I have a very vague memory of a huge church in Dallas. Mm-hmm. But I grew up mostly in New Jersey, and we went to the same church for my entire childhood up through high school. Then we started kind of switching around a little bit. I went to private Christian school through 8th grade. That school was run through a Baptist church. But then once I left home, I would still go to church with my family. But once I had moved out, kind of tapered off.
Got it.
Yeah. So I have spent a lot of time in church setting, for sure.
And around religious people.
And around religious people, yes.
Right. So one of the questions I want to ask, do you want to ask a question?
No, I'm waiting to see what you're smiling big. Something's coming up.
I want to ask this question because one of the things I love about our relationship with you guys is that we don't agree on a lot of things. And yet
that's great.
We're really good friends. I think we're trying to model like what it means to be like friends with people.
I think we agree on a lot of things.
Yes.
I think there are some fundamentals that we maybe have differing, opinions on.
Mm-hmm. And we have always felt like you guys, where we disagree, we felt like you guys have respected that.
Yes.
And we've tried to be that with you guys. So, Mike, like we've had a little bit of conversation about God. Like you have some different views about God, I think. How would you summarize
unique?
Those? Yeah, unique. Unique is the word.
Uh-huh.
How would you summarize those in like a nutshell? Just so our audience can get to know kind of like where you're coming from.
At a 10,000-foot level, I feel like my relationship with God, or what could be considered God by a lot of people, is very personal and kind of homegrown. So in my later teen years, early 20s, I spent a lot of time considering, what could be out there, what would be out there. And got to a place where I was really, really comfortable. Basically, I do think there is something that exists out there. I don't have a lot of conviction on what it is. I think pretty much anything is possible. And I'm comfortable with finding out when I get there.
Yeah, so categorically, like you're more of an agnostic, like just not sure, not convinced either way.
Right. And I think it's important, I believe I am unconvincible. Like, for me personally, I don't think anybody could know for sure.
How about you, Leanna? How would you categorize your view of religion or view of God?
I feel very blessed that I grew up with a very strong sort of directed message around God. I think it gave me a lot of peace that as I aged, I felt like I had a relationship with God, and so I didn't delve into the scary parts. I had one of my best friends in college was a reluctant atheist, and she always told me how jealous she was about the peace that I had around my relationship with God and spirituality and the universe. And so I think over time and in just my relationships with other people, my learning about other religions and other perspectives, different lifestyles, I've sort of trended towards being also a little bit more agnostic, but I think for sure I firmly believe in God, and that I think with the variety of religions that I've kind of been exposed to, I feel like it's he's out there, but I can't put them in a box or conceptualize them or give them a definition that's specific to one church.
Mm-hmm. I think I remember this specifically. So we were standing in our kitchen next door, having a conversation with the four of us. And because Ben has a degree in biology, I remember you two having a really interesting conversation about Big Bang Theory, evolution, Christianity. And I was just kind of nodding like, I don't know what you're saying, but this sounds really interesting. I mean, what was that about? Can you remember that conversation?
I remember having a conversation and getting into it, but I can't remember.
What I love about talking to you about this subject, Mike, we've had several of these conversations, is you've actually thought a lot about it.
A lot.
This is not something that you're just kind of like, I don't know what I think about God. Like you're really you've gone through a scientific study and done a lot of look at the physics.
So that was part of it, yeah. Because there was a lot of discomfort or turmoil in me when I was younger, thinking, because all my grandparents very religious. And so it was, hey, how can I make this make sense to me? And so I spent a lot of time considering it, reading on a lot of different crazy stuff, how, like, I had friends that were physicists, and so we'd have discussions on how the physics of the soul or spirituality might work. And once you go down that rat hole, it gets really, really complicated.
And very technical.
Very technical. And you get to the point where you're like, there's a really good chance that us, with the brains that we have, aren't even capable of fathoming what it really means. Right. Yeah. So, yes, I've done a lot of just personal exploration down that road to try and come to a place where I was comfortable and settled, and which I got to and am very happy with.
And I think I would recall in that conversation, this touches on something that I've always struggled with when it came to church, was the butting of heads between scientific concepts and Christianity, where I felt there were a lot of times where they couldn't coexist. And personally, I didn't feel that way. I thought there didn't need to be so much controversy. Like, we don't have to disprove one in order to prove the other, and vice versa. And so I have struggled with that sort of messaging when it's like, this can't be true, or the Bible isn't true.
Right.
Or the Bible can't be true if this is true. And so I tend to back away from those sort of situations just because I can't rationalize them personally.
One of the things I'm really proud about the years that we spent here is that we were able to have like really good conversations, even with people like right next door on these things, which I think a lot of Christians, there's a barrier. Like, we can talk about news, weather, and sports, but talking about like some of these big questions. Leanna, I remember something that happened with you that I want you to confirm whether it's really true.
Okay.
I think early on there was a test you were putting Lynley through, like, about whether you could really trust her or not. Do you remember any of that?
You're going to have to elaborate.
Okay.
So when we moved in, I don't know if you remember this or not, because I actually really loved it, because I loved your authenticity. This is how
one
I
of our
knew.
favorite Denver
This is
stories.
how I knew that I was going to love you, because we had been here for about 6 weeks, and we were outside. Of course, the kids are always playing, and you said, "Hey, I just want you to know that you have passed my test." Do you remember this?
No.
And I said,
I remember a lot of conversations.
This is so Leanna.
I said,
I totally believe it. Yeah,
I said, what do you mean? And you said, well, the word on the street was just who was coming in here, what was going to happen. And she said, you said, you haven't judged me. And so you've passed my test and we can be friends. And I knew right then that I was going to love you, because I was so appreciative of the fact that we could disagree, or that you could be like, hey, I don't necessarily understand what you guys are coming in here to do, or, I don't necessarily want to be a part of it, but we can all be friends. And our sons were such good friends. And we had, you guys were in our house all the time, making gingerbread houses and, parties all the time. And so I remember when he was not out there with me, but I came in and I was like, I passed her test. And
we're in. We can stop faking it.
We're going to be friends.
We actually ordered pizza and had a party that night.
Yeah, now we can start judging them.
And we have been judging
the
you
doors
ever
open.
since.
Yes. But I think because we're 10 minutes from the course factory. And so I think the concern here was that we were going to come in and, if people were drinking on the street, we were going to have a problem with it. If there was conversation about marijuana, we were going to have a problem with it. We were asked if we handle snakes, not by you guys.
Are you kidding?
No kidding.
Here, yeah. And so I think that was what it was like. Okay, good. Well, we're gonna do this. We're gonna be friends.
I don't remember that specific conversation, but I do remember when we first learned that you guys were church planters who were moving in next door. My biggest concern wasn't necessarily for our family, and I think throughout this conversation, it'll probably become pretty clear that Mike and I are very receptive to pretty much anyone who can be respectful and kind. And but I had trepidation about how that would affect the people around me. So in reality, what the neighborhood would do with that, because I didn't anticipate that most of the neighbors would also be that easygoing.
And turns out you were right.
Yes. And so those were the types of things that I worried about, just how it would affect our relationships with everyone on the street if it created extra drama that may or may not have been necessary in any way. And then it brought up a lot of, like Mike was saying, in your late teens and early 20s, most people I think go through, unless you've been really raised and have a true belief system at that point, you go through that soul searching kind of, what do I really believe? And then you get to a place where you feel comfortable and you kind of move on with your life. And you don't have to articulate it on a regular basis with anyone. And so I really think I felt some nerves of, I'm going to have to answer a lot of questions, and I'm not sure I can put it into words anymore because I've sort of settled into my thoughts and I've moved on. And it really did bring up a lot of, like, why do I feel this way? And it's a lot of soul searching again, and which can be, create a lot of mental sort of angst.
I thought it was really healthy for me personally.
I did.
Because I did get to that point. Yeah. Probably forgot half of the theories I came up with. And then when you guys started talking, especially around the campfire, when we would talk, it would be like, oh yeah, this is how I kind of accounted for that or handled that. This is how I approached that to be comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, you told me that one time sitting under our tree was, you guys moved in and have made everyone have to kind of consider their worldview again. So it's basically what you're saying. I mean, everyone had kind of settled into what they were thinking, and then there was like a little bit of a turmoil of, okay, do I still believe that? How did I come to that to what I believed? And so, I think that was a little bit of the hard stuff with some others on the street. Yeah. So what was the conversation, behind our backs, not in a bad way, but like before we moved in and even when we did, like what was the turmoil?
Well, for me, it was funny because I knew nothing about anything. I don't even know that I heard you guys were planting a church until after you had moved in. But I remember seeing you when you were looking at the house. You had the boys on the back deck
yes.
watching me and Mason like pass the football or something.
And
your eyes were just like, oh yeah, this looks perfect. And I was like, oh yeah, they're not weird. Yeah. And so all the other stuff I heard was, wow. I was like,
and I agree. Fine. I think when we heard that you had 4 young children moving in and 3 of them were boys and fit right in with our son, I was like, this is perfect. Yeah, I was thrilled.
The other thing that I think worked well for us is when we used to talk before we had kids, hey, how do you want to present religion to the kids? It was really hey, I just want them to be aware of every, just knowledgeable. And then if they choose one, if one speaks to them and they go that route, that's great. I'm personally pretty lazy and wasn't great about doing that up to that point. But having you guys do the heavy lifting for the Christianity side with them both,
it was great.
It was like, oh, perfect.
I want to talk about that because you guys were really open to what was a world religions class in my basement where we kind of started gathering kids, and every week we'd talk about one of the religions. And obviously, I'm coming at it from a Christian, so I'm not a Scientologist, but we would learn about Scientology and Mormonism and all the difference. And Leanna, you sat in a lot of those and you were very engaged. Like, I think you enjoy also learning about, belief systems and why people believe them and their background.
Yes, I think I loved that. That was something that really like took my comfort level with your family, like, or off the charts, because I knew you were here with a Christian church, and I know those teachings and I'm comfortable with them. But knowing that you were comfortable enough and felt it was important enough to really look at other belief systems and kind of study them, even through your lens, I thought was great. Like, we love having those kinds of conversations with the children, because I think knowledge in that sense is great. It empowers people. If you are scared of it, it creates, fear and controversy that maybe is super easy to fix.
I think it also instills a comfort level with the children if they're interacting with someone from one of those others, because then they have an idea about it. They're like, oh yeah, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
Well, and that's how that came up. I mean, so for the listeners who don't know, Ava had come home and said, hey, I've met this friend. She's Mormon. What does that mean? What do we believe? What do Mormons believe? Yeah. And so that's what kind of bred that idea for Ben, is just to say, hey, we need to teach our children what all these religions believe, so that they can have a respectful knowledge of what they are when they're having conversations with them, instead of just, this is a fault, I think, of Christians, is that we can just tend to shut people out and believe that, we believe this is right and you're wrong, and we're not even going to, entertain what you're saying, instead of just being, respectful of what they do believe.
And having different kinds of people in your life gives you a healthy appreciation for empathy and understanding where other people are coming from and what their story is. One of the conversations Lynley and I had recently that was impactful to me is we talked to Jennifer Rothschild in Atlanta about her love for C.S. Lewis. And she said that the thing she admired so much about him was his intellectual generosity. That even though he was an intellectual, he made room at the table for intellectuals who saw things from a completely different perspective and maintained community with them. The lack of diversity with intellectual generosity today is affecting the church. We surround ourselves with people who think like us, act like us, vote like us, and we're robbing ourselves of the ability to connect with people from other walks of life. So what Mike is saying here that I think is so interesting is he had an appreciation for the subject of religion. He wanted his kids to be exposed to the various viewpoints, and his perspective is let the kid make his own decision. So when we entered in, and Christianity was now represented in our family, it was neat the way the Lusches allowed their kids to be exposed to it, allowed their kids to learn about Jesus, allowed their kids to learn from a Christian family. And we found that it was a reciprocal relationship. We learned a lot from listening to them as well, and developed empathy for people who come from different walks of life. Mike, there was a moment when I remember you shared with me that you felt like it was wrong to try to convince someone that their religion is wrong. Like you're you kind of rose up in that moment. Like this is something that for you is a big deal. Like in terms of, you can present your religion to me. I'm interested. I'm all ears. But the moment you try to convert me, it feels uncomfortable.
It does. And I think a lot of that just stems from the amount of time I put in. Like I feel like this isn't a question that I'm still trying to answer. And I also think it's really healthy from the other perspective. Like if I had the power to change anybody else's mind about their religion, I would never, ever, I would never want to talk you out of your religion, because I do think it's something so beneficial for people. And so, but that is the side of it. Like if people really try and forcefully just no, you're wrong, which I've had a few buddies who do it, and then we go down the road of discussion, and then it kind of falls off. But
tell me one of those stories. Have you ever had a moment where someone was being really forceful with you? Because you're the most laid-back guy I know. If you look up laid-back in the dictionary,
your picture
Mike's
is there.
Right there. But that really bothers you.
It did. I did have a good friend, who was dating a girl in college, who was one of my good friends, who I think her dad was a bishop in the Mormon church. And he ended up falling in love with her and marrying her. And he was we never had any kind of philosophical discussions. He was a buddy from basketball, and we would go hang out. And I remember getting into it one time, and he was just telling me, he was like, he's like, no, you don't believe in God because of this, this, and this. And I was just like, what are you talking about? And he, didn't have anything to back it up, but it was just very, really put me on the defensive and kind of offended me that he wouldn't respect, my opinion or journey or...
Like that word right there, journey. I do feel that in times where I've been involved in conversations where I felt like someone felt the need to convince me or to convert to anything, to Mormonism, to Christianity, to anything. It's that respect for each person's personal faith journey. Like if you're just discounting that they haven't done enough, they haven't figured it out because they haven't done the amount of work that I've done and I know more than them, that puts you on a defensive.
Feels condescending.
And it can feel condescending, and it puts you on a defensive where you're like, well, now I need to really prove that I've done all, versus just having a conversation about, there's so many beautiful things about religion and all different types of religion, and just being like, I found this has blessed my life, and letting that speak for itself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I thought you guys did a really good job of presenting, a very strong Christian family that in reality was like role models for how it could work well without being like, you gotta be like us. You have to agree with us. You have to do everything we say because we figured it out. You've always been very honest and vulnerable and respectful about that, where it's like, we feel very confident in what we've come to as a family and as church leaders, and we've done a lot of work, but that doesn't mean that you guys, your opinion doesn't matter or your process doesn't matter.
We would say at Storyline a lot is to invite people into your life and not a location. And so, that's really on the street. We just thought, we do not ever want to bait and switch our neighbors. Like, we wanted to have you guys over in our home as much as we could just to get to know you, and then you could see, you know what I mean? Just get to know us. And then at that point decide, I'm interested in what they believe or I'm not, and we're still going to stay friends. And so I do think that's where we miss the mark a lot, is that, kind of like what you're talking about being forceful. We knock on someone's door and we say, do you know where you're going when you die? And then when the person has some conversations about that, it's like, okay, well then they just walk away, like, oh, well, you didn't convert immediately kind of thing, instead of just getting to talk to them.
I do think the way you guys approached it with us was perfect. Like, we always felt welcome.
Yes.
Always felt welcome. And I was more than willing to, support you.
And you guys did.
Because I thought that was important. We love you guys. And it was like, hey, any way we can help. But there was never any kind of pushiness, I guess. No, there's no...
we were happy when our kids participated in things that Storyline had going on, whether it was Vacation Bible School or just going to church on Sunday with your kids, or any of your, festivals and things. It was never, we never felt like that was at all a detriment or a problem, because you were welcoming and gave opportunities for great conversations and just open that door. But it wasn't like, well, you came last week, but you didn't come this week.
Right.
And so
like there was a scorecard.
Right. Which I think was important.
Well, Lynley and I have said this often, that we heard someone say long ago that the conversation is the relationship. And I think the quality of our conversations is the quality of our relationships. And I think one of the things, the reason we're having this conversation with you guys today is it is so special when you can live next to people who disagree in some areas, but you still have good conversations and you can talk about it. Yeah. It's not off limits, because whether we like it or not, all of us do come to that question of God at some point in our life and have to think through that. Your kids are now getting into those ages. Yeah. And it's important that we have the discussion and be able to connect on it and know where each other is.
So let's stop the recording right here and take a moment to kind of unpack some of the myths that I think Ben and I came into church planting with about unchurched people. And I'll just jump right in. The first one is that I believed at that point that they just don't know about religion. But, one of the first things Mike said is that his mom grew up Southern Baptist and had a bad experience with it. And so I think we underestimate people's stories and why they got to where they are.
The term unchurched is actually a weird term because neither one of these two people are unchurched. They've been to church. They've been exposed to church. They know the game, but they also aren't currently attending a church. So we assume unchurched people have no background in the church when Mike and Leanna are a perfect example. They have a lot of background in the church. Second myth we had to overcome is that they have no interest in coming to church programs. They talk about how they were happy for Mason to come to Storyline Kids Camp. They were happy to come to the father-daughter banquet. It wasn't that they were turned off by all things church. It's just we had to be extra sensitive to the bait and switch and be careful that we didn't invite them to something only to impress upon them last minute a need to make a decision about how they feel about Jesus. And over time, we built trust.
And I think another myth was just that they won't be respectful of Christianity. I know recently we did an episode with Jason Thacker, and he talked about how we lump people together. And I think sometimes as Christians, we make this large assumption that people who are not Christians are not respectful of Christians. And, you know, Mike and Leanna were some of our dearest friends there and very respectful always. And they showed that during the episode and just talked about how they would come to things for us because out of honor.
One of my favorite memories is when we were getting ready for kids camp, or you know what? It was an egg hunting
Yes.
deal.
Stuffing like thousands of eggs.
All of our neighbors helped stuff eggs for the church because they just wanted to help and support us. They thought what we were doing was cool.
Well, they helped with a lot of things. I mean, VBS crafts. They put together birdhouses. I mean, all kinds of things.
So before you jump to conclusions about your unchurched neighbor, do not assume that they have no background with religion. Do not assume that they have no interest in coming to a church program. And do not assume that they're going to be disrespectful of your faith. We found the opposite to be true. Let's lighten the mood. Things Christians do that you think are weird. Like even when you're just driving down the street and you see a Christian bumper sticker or a T-shirt or
sayings that people say.
Like what are some of the things like if you were going to talk to Christians about, hey, don't do this, it makes us feel weird. Like aren't any things come onto your mind?
I live in that ignorance bubble. I don't know that I attribute anything specifically to Christians. Yeah, personally.
So you don't personally look at Christians like they're extra weird?
Well, and this is where I don't know if we're the best people for this interview, just because I think I was that weird person for, a solid couple of decades of my life. And so, like I feel like it's not weird to me.
Hold on. So there was a time when Leanna wore a Just Give Me Jesus and Coffee T-shirt?
Well, no, because coffee wasn't that cool back then. Like Starbucks wasn't open yet. Yeah. But
you were a church girl.
Yeah, totally. Yes. 100%.
And
I was the weird kid in my neighborhood who went to the different school that was a half an hour away. I had to wear skirts below my knees and had to wear tights or pantyhose. And, I didn't own a pair of jeans for years. Like I was, and that weird kid who was like, you want to come to church with me every week? Let's go to youth group. And, my friends in the neighborhood were like, okay.
What are you guys self-conscious about?
Yes, that is exactly.
For being weird.
Yeah, what do you think you do that's weird? And we'll tell you.
Okay, like here's an example. Like let's say, Mike, you and I were talking and like something was really bothering you and you were being confessional with me. Like I always thought, like, is it weird if I say, Mike, can I pray for you? Could I just say a prayer for you? Would that feel weird?
No.
Not coming from you.
Not coming from you.
Why?
As a friend.
Why?
Well, you were a pastor.
Because I know what
that's
that
how
means
you approach.
to you.
Yeah, I know that's how you approach things.
Because I think anything is possible. I see no harm, only possible benefit. So I'm like, hey, yeah.
That does actually remind me. Our other neighbors had friends who experienced a tragic loss of their child, and you went to their home and prayed with that family. And to this day, they talk about how much that meant to them at that time. They are also not churchgoers, but they felt blessed by you taking the time out and coming in and sitting with that family to help them process that level of grief in any way.
And you know what blows me away about that is that I never really had a religious conversation with either one of them. Mm-hmm. And they she knocked on my door and said, would you come down? Like, we're in crisis. Would you say a prayer? So like to this day, to me, it still like was one of the most honoring things that anyone ever asked me to do.
It was also a really behind closed doors. We were so upset with the Lord. I mean, like, because this was our chance to say, we're going to pray for this child and the Lord is going to save this child, and they're going to believe and, and all these things are going to work out in this hallmark moment. And then the child ended up passing away. And it was like, dang it.
It was devastating to me.
Yeah.
God didn't answer the prayer the way we wanted him to answer it. And so that was really hard for us.
Well, this is a true story. So I prayed for that child. And then for the next couple of days, I prayed nonstop for that child. And I was actually at church about to go up and preach a sermon. And I got a text that the little boy had died. And I was so angry at God. I was like, God, these people are looking for a reason to believe. And I've been praying. You say in Scripture, like, if you have not because you ask not. I asked so much that you'd pray.
Yeah.
And so that's the hard thing about God, is that he doesn't always operate the way we want to. But it's so encouraging, Mike, for you to say that to me, because I always have felt some weirdness about praying for people. Yeah. If nothing else, you hear my heart for you coming out through the prayer. That like, I'm on your side and I want this to be fixed for you. And
definitely.
That's encouraging.
Do you think that's because you knew us well? I mean, if somebody that you didn't know very well that you worked for said, Mike, can I pray for you? Would you feel more uncomfortable?
I would, yeah.
Yes.
Well, I've had situations before. I feel like there was a group of older teenagers or something that were doing some kind of faith-based thing or something. And they've just kind of come around and say, hey, is there anything we can pray for you? That one kind of took me aback a little bit, and it was like, don't worry about me.
I agree. I think the personal relationship thing is something that worked out really well for our families and allowed this easy friendship to grow despite some differences, because when you say, I want to pray for you guys, we really understand where that's coming from. But you saying that to a complete stranger would be odd. It's about the relationship that you guys fostered. When you came in, you were like, we're church planters, but we're not here to make you come to our church. And I'm pretty sure you maybe literally said those exact words.
Yeah.
We are here to be a part of this community and this neighborhood, and let's all be friends. And it made it really easy for us. And then being parents of kids of the same age, obviously that common ground just totally created a space for us to be friends with you, aside from you being a pastor and a pastor's wife. Like, we didn't have to always dwell in that space of, okay, we could be respectful of the time commitment that being a pastor and a pastor's wife is, but we joked a lot about how, and we probably told you this, how we literally got to live next to celebrities for years. Like,
I did.
We were in the Westwoods magazine. Okay?
You really do have like a fan base.
We went out to lunch. I don't remember. I think we went to Buffalo Wild Wings.
Okay.
You and I. And there must have been 4 people just came up. Said, oh, hey, Ben, how you doing? And
right.
It was just like, wow.
It's like living next door to Peyton Manning.
Well,
you just have
funny.
It's and that lifestyle that pastors and their wives and families have to live. The Glass House is like the perfect name for this podcast, because you are constantly under a microscope, and you have to either put on a really good show, which generally I would think would fall apart eventually, or just be willing to be very vulnerable and open. And I think you guys really did a great job. Now, not everybody was receptive. Not everybody will be receptive.
What was so special about the time we spent with you guys, though, is that, to your point, everywhere I would go, people feel like they knew me, and it was hard to ever feel like I was off. Do you know what I'm saying?
Totally.
But I felt like when we would hang out with our neighbors, like I was just Ben.
Yes.
I wasn't Pastor Ben. I was just Miles and Max and Jack's dad. Like, Ava, too. She's his father.
Ava counts.
Yeah.
You ask all the goofy questions that you couldn't when you were all...
Absolutely.
Yes.
Because I am a weird guy that asks weird questions.
I recall some very awkward questions.
We are not putting those on the show. But part of our deal was when we had people in the house, we just want to have fun with them.
Yeah.
Like, if they left and said, The Mandrills are fun people. We feel like that was a huge win.
Yes.
And then, if there ever was an event at church that we feel like your family might enjoy, it wouldn't be weird then for us to say, hey, you guys should come to the outdoor movie. Like, you would really like it.
Yeah.
And then this is something we actually teach is when we would invite non-church going people to a church event, we always tried to make sure it didn't feel like, now that we got you here.
A little bait and switch.
Yes.
We just try to make it pure fun so that, Mike, when you came to our father-daughter banquet, you were out there dancing with your daughter, and you're as bad a dancer as I am. And when it was over, it was just like we had fun together.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
we didn't say like, okay, now sign up for the next 6 Sundays for my new sermon series. It was just like, thanks for coming.
Well, and I do think that made it so easy to go to those types of things with you. Because after going to a couple, it was like, oh, yeah, no, this is just, we go have fun. Go have a good
And
time.
you invited some friends at some point, too. Like, I think a couple of guys that you'd be like, hey, you should come to this. It's cool. And you had confidence, I think, that it wasn't going to be weird for them.
Yeah.
It provides a ton of opportunities to speak with your family about these things. And like Mike said, if our kids find solace and comfort and joy in attending a church like what you guys created with Storyline in their lifetime, I think that's fantastic. Like, it's not something that people need to be scared of. I think there's a lot of people who have preconceived notions. In fact, I know for a fact I had these conversations before you guys moved in and even after about what Storyline was here for, what you were doing, and in general they were just way off the mark, and they didn't give you guys the opportunity they didn't participate enough to really get an understanding of what was going on. And over time maybe those people would participate or just never, because they just don't have that in them. I think just presenting the beautiful message that you guys have created, kind of can stand on its own in a way. It doesn't have to be forceful. It doesn't have to be, you need to sign up for the next 6 weeks or you're not going to get the whole message sort of concept. And being very receptive to people coming and going and coming and going, because you don't know when it's going to click.
Yeah.
And not feeling... I mean, I was always curious, too, on your thoughts about non-church goers. Like, how does the pastor's family look at, the neighbors and who won't come or don't come for whatever reason?
Well, one of the things I've always said, and I've tried to help pastors understand, is that every person has a story and every wound is an open door. So like, to really get to know a person, you got to get to know their pain, like what they've been through. So one of the neighbors on our street had some real issues with us and with our religion and Christianity. And as we were able to sit down with her, like, there's a lot of pain in her past related to Christianity and a lot of fear and a lot of hurt. And so if I'm in her shoes and Christians are coming onto the street and I have that associated in the past, like, I can empathize with that. Like, I would probably feel the way she feels. So I think one of the things that we try not to do with non-religious people is to try to understand, like, first, like, who are these people? Why are they the way they are? Why do they have the beliefs they have? What's their background? Before coming to conclusions immediately that they're bad people because they don't come to our church.
Right.
Kind of thing.
But I do think, to your point, it was hurtful for us when we had the same methodology with all of you of just trying to get to know you, and some were receptive and some were not. And so we felt like we were almost being judged. We were being judged more harshly.
Very much.
They were believing that we were judging them, but honestly, we were not judging them. They were judging us.
That's
just
true.
because association to religion. And so we never even got the chance to get to know them really, because they had a wall up.
A wall, yeah. It's hard to get past that level of prejudice or bigotry.
Yeah, it's almost like prejudice is wrong.
Well, and I think, for us, that's a big deal. Like, on any level, any sort of form of, and we really teamed up with you guys, because anytime I felt like there was any level of prejudice against your family or your church, that was something that we were not tolerant of, and wanted our kids to feel that way. Like, if you can't go in and try and tear down someone if you have no relationship there. And we wanted to empower our family to be like, no, you know this family, you know what they're doing. Don't let other people change your opinion of what's going on. You're involved there.
Yeah. So if you were invited to a church I was pastoring, and I said, Mike and Leanna, I want you to come and talk to all these nice Christian people about if they were moving into your neighborhood and wanted to become your friends, what kind of things would you tell them? Like, here's how you would win our hearts. Here's ways that the guard would come down if you would do these things. What are some of those things? They're just basic behaviors that maybe get overlooked.
Ooh, I would think the just common respect it starts with, right? That is the step number one. Just respect people. And then from there, find things you have in common. Find things you like to enjoy.
Exactly.
You know, that just like you and I had a few things that we could go bond over.
Yep.
And with the boys and all sorts of stuff. And I think that's where it starts. And don't rush it, because I think it takes time.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Really good. What would you add to that, Leanna? Anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think just the commonality, like maybe stepping aside from like the whole focus being on I'm the pastor and this is the church I'm planting, but you're also just a human and you have your parents. So how can I connect with the other parents? You love basketball. How can I connect with people through basketball? You know, like finding common hobbies that don't have to be church related to build on. And then it opens the door for all kinds of conversations and a comfort level where you're like, well, it doesn't matter. We can go eat like chicken wings together because we both like chicken wings. Like,
You know, I think that's what Jesus taught. If I'm really living out Christianity, he said, let your light shine before men that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven.
yep.
So if I'm really modeling Christianity, I'm letting the people who live around me like see my life and hopefully be grateful for my life. And if I move away, be sad that I'm moving away and not celebrate. And
Yes.
and we tried to create a church that did that. And so it would only be like normal for me to tell stories about stuff I'm doing with my neighbors on my street and like fun I'm having with the guys who live on Russell Court.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so I always felt like it was also part of not being a hypocrite.
Yes.
Of if I really say what we have is something the world needs and all I do is hang out with church people,
Yeah.
how can that really be true in my life? I'm not practicing what I preach.
Well, and hopefully, we always felt like just talking about some of the early drama that you had when you first came and were planting the church, just as a human, we wanted you guys to feel safe and supported in the fact that, you seemed like fantastic people and we wanted to build you up. And you would hope that, that's the human experience where you build people up. Even if you don't necessarily agree, like I saw you guys having success, I felt like it was earned. You worked really hard for it and really applauded you when things were going well. And, and then understanding when you left Storyline, although it was crushing that you guys were leaving, understanding, your journey and what you were doing with that, like that. As a friend, you just want success for your friends and you want joy for them. And so hopefully if you're giving that to the people who are around you, you're creating a community that supports each other, then you're going to get it back and forth.
Yeah. Lynley, I loved listening back to this conversation of just the depth of a relationship that we were able to form with the Lusches. And the conversation is the relationship. We talk about that. We have had such an incredible relationship with them because we've been able to talk about things from different perspectives. I hope everybody listening has just at least one challenge to go and find a friend across the street, across the way, that maybe you have no business being in their life. You don't have a ton in common, but God's placed you in the same proximity together. We always loved Acts 17, where Paul said, from one man God made every nation of men that they should inhabit the whole earth, and he determined the exact times and places that they should live. Let that be a challenge to us all, that we've been placed on a street, in a community, around certain people that we might bless their lives and allow them to bless ours as well.
As the holidays come up, we wanted to share a bonus episode with you about some things that we've learned along the way and are still learning with how to engage with our neighbors. So be on the lookout for that episode soon. Thank you so much for listening. If you're enjoying the podcast, would you consider leaving us a rating or a review wherever you listen to the show? It gives us insight into what you like, and it helps others find the show as well. The Glass House is hosted by Lifeway, produced and edited by Angie Elkins Media, original music by Robert Elkins, sound engineering by Dale Sandberg, and artwork by Cameron Spooner.